Hey, what's up guys? So the other day, like the majority of you guys, I read this, which is the quarterly 3 review for this year for Metamaterials. And I don't think it was one of those things that was going to make the price jump up, because as you can see, it didn't. There's a lot of information on there that was good, but not necessarily something that we all would have been super surprised about, especially. And even if you're someone that's investing in the metamaterials that really believes on what it could do in the long term, just like me, something that I preach about every time I make a video like this. So I think my overall consensus with the quarterly 3 statement for 2021 was that it was exciting, but it wasn't surprising. So let's talk about that. But before we talk about that, just keep in mind, guys, I'm still learning how to read a balance sheet and how to read an income statement. And I haven't even scratched the surface yet of how to read a cash flow statement. So all this is going to be based off my knowledge and how that supports what my feelings are. So there was research behind it. I actually made a video previously about how to read a balance sheet because I am fairly confident on that. And I plan on making the part 2 for the income statement. So make sure you guys check that out as well if that's something that you're not really accustomed to, because it is important. So keep that in mind yet again, and let's dive into this a little bit. So again, I said this was exciting at the end of the day, but let's not talk about that part just yet. Let's go into the idea of it not being surprising, and I'll give you guys my opinion why. So one of the first things that jumped out at me when I read the report was the amount of cash that they had on hand, over $140 million, which is a lot, but again, keep in mind that that money came from the acquisition of Torchlight, the money they made from there. I think they made over $160 million. But in general, cash on hand is always something really good. It was a significant impact, a significant role to their assets. And if you do an assets to liability ratio based on the numbers that they have on their balance sheet, then you're gonna get almost 5, which means that they were forced to pay off all their liabilities. They can do it almost 5 times over. But one thing that I had to remember and keep in mind is that a balance sheet is essentially just a snapshot of what their financial information looks like at a specific moment in time. So with that being said, that $140 million doesn't consider some additional money that they spent, like money they spent on operations related things. I think they spent $15 million on one thing, a little over $6 million on something else. And it doesn't include the $70+ million that they spent on the acquisition of nanotech. So whenever we get this next balance sheet, it is a probability that that cash on hand is going to be a lot lower, but that may not necessarily be a bad thing for the long term. So speaking of other operation expenses, if you check their financial statement, which was that next page, you can see that their operating expenses in comparison to the third quarter of last year jumped up by almost 350%. So all the money they're spending on anything relative to operations has dramatically increased. And you can also see that the majority of that was due to the general and administration category, which is part of SGA, selling, general, and administration, where they spent over 500% on that particular category. Now, for those of you guys that don't know, SGA, or selling, general, and administration, is basically money that is spent towards operations, more specifically towards, I believe, rent, utilities, I believe even payroll, employees, human resources, office supplies, general stuff like that. General things are pretty important, especially with a company that is expanding. When you hire people, you're gonna spend more money on that. That's something also really important. Even though it is spending money, it's not necessarily a bad thing either. Some things that were really good is I noticed that their revenue for this quarter was almost 200% higher in relation to the previous quarter, which again was very exciting, but staying on this category wasn't surprising. For starters, they were still in the process, I believe, of getting with Torchlight, if that news was even announced, which I believe it wasn't yet. So they were still a fairly small company that was only available on brokerage apps like Fidelity. And at this point, they've been able to gather enough money to be able to buy new technology and new materials and expand their manufacturing line so they can generate a lot more products. So the amount of money they were going to make revenue-wise should be a lot more than last year at the same time. But it's always good to see that that's happening. And you can also see that while the revenue is going up, which is how much they're making off their goods and services, the cost of those goods and services also went up. And the cost of goods and services is involved in how much they have to spend on the manufacturing of it, the raw materials and things of that nature. That's something that's I believe is always expected with any company that makes their own product. It does kind of suck that that increases. But again, that's not a bad thing either. And that kind of goes into why I'm overall excited about this whole situation. And I think it revolves around the overall theme, or the overall two different themes: productivity and expansion. At least from my personal opinion, it seems like all the moves that Metamaterial has been making is based off increasing productivity and increasing expansion. From little things such as being parts of expos to present their products, to big things such as acquisitions of other companies like Nanotech, it is all about advertising the products of what they have, how they can be of impact to a certain situation, and hopefully persuading people to have deals and acquisitions and contracts with them. Whether the company is very small or very big, everything has a purpose. Nanotech, for example, which was on a video that we talked about a couple of weeks ago, that wasn't just a, hey, you seem pretty cool type company, here's some money. That was a planned situation. For starters, Nanotech is a company that also uses rolling mass lithography, something that Metamaterial uses as well in creating their film. Now, what they do is on different applications with banknote security and branding, but that benefits Metamaterial because, for one, that adds another vertical. Two, Nanotech has research and developers and manufacturers that are very experienced at that, which will also help Metamaterial. Metamaterial will help Nanotech by doubling the amount of productivity that they have by the next couple of years. Nanotech also has, I believe, over 100,000 square foot facility, which could give Metamaterial the opportunity to add more equipment if needed be, and if available to be able to produce what Nanotech has, along with a lot of other things. This is all about productivity and expanding. Speaking of expanding, we talked about all the money that they spent on operating expenses and how that increased a lot by over 300%, and how general and administration played a huge role in that, staffing, office supplies, things like that. And I said, it's very expected for that to happen when you expand your building, when you expand your productivity. You're going to have to hire new people to take care of things. They're going to need a desk and a chair and a computer to work off of. Expanding is something that they're working on, not just with Nanotech. Metamaterial has announced a 65,000 square foot facility that they're still working on in Dartmouth, which should be finished by the first half of next year. They also mentioned another facility that they have, I believe, in Plymouth, California, which will be responsible for their nanoweb and other applications, and how they're going to quadruple the size and the productivity of that location. This is all just examples of increasing productivity and increasing expansion, which is obviously a good thing, and also a good thing because the CEO, George Palikaris, has mentioned how they want to be able to increase productivity because they want to be more appealing to any type of company, let alone major companies, on not only can we make you this product, but we can make it at a more effective rate. And we've seen with any type of technology, the easier it is to make, the cheaper it becomes. So not only can they make it at a faster rate, but they can sell it for a cheaper price if possible. And that could be for a multitude of avenues. Over the past couple of weeks, the metaverse has been a huge topic. And for Metamaterial, that's just one vertical. That's just their VR, and more specifically, their AR and AR fusion technology. They have defogging and de-icing on their windshields. They have a bunch of other different types of verticals, not to mention the verticals that they acquired from Nanotech. And this will ultimately definitely help on having them acquire more companies and more OEMs, or original equipment manufacturers, which is something that they're striving to do by the end of next year. They're hoping that the majority of the revenue that they make next year is based off developing partnerships with those particular companies, and things that they're doing right now is going to make them more appealing. So even though when we get to the bottom line of their entire financial statement, specifically their net loss, which was over $11 million, which is a lot higher than what it was back at the same period of time in 2020, which I believe was about $2 million. Money is being spent for a purpose. They always say that to make money, you have to spend money, and they are the embodiment of that, of course, along with the other companies, but we're talking about this one specific. It isn't surprising that the amount of money that they're making is a lot higher, and the amount of money that they're spending is even higher. But what's exciting is where the money is coming from and where the money is going to. Expanding and productivity, at least in my personal opinion. Overall, yes, I'm not surprised, but I am very excited based off this, and I'm expecting their quarter 4 results to be a lot better, hopefully seeing a lot more revenue, and I won't be surprised to see operating expenses and net loss to be a little bit higher for the time being. Eventually, I believe those will offset because I am a firm believer of this company and I'm in this for the long term. And if you want to know why, make sure you check out this video I made about a week or so ago that will pretty much go into detail of that and give you some insight on maybe if this is a company you should invest in and maybe if this is a company you should hold on to for at least a little while. But I do appreciate you guys watching, and until next time, take care.